Hello, and welcome to the Anexinet Infrastructure Modernization Podcast. Here on AIM, we invite industry professionals and subject matter experts on to discuss current trends and technology topics. Today, we will be talking about preparing for a returning workforce with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. With me today is Joe Vidal, Chief Technologist for the channel for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing super fantastic, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
So, it's been an interesting set of months, to say the least.
Indeed.
But now, hopefully, the worst is behind us, and we can focus on preparing to bring employees back to the office.
Exactly.
Looking back a little bit, though, we talk a lot about concepts of digital transformation, but it seems to me that what has happened to the way business gets done because of COVID was much more of a digital upheaval.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
What do things look like out there from your perspective?
Well, Chris, you bring up a great point. And the bottom line is that, while everyone in the IT space was in the process of upgrading their security, implementing two-factor authentication, all those great things to lock down and secure their data and really protect themselves from the cybersecurity bad people, right, or the bad actors, as we call them, always looking for new threats, new attacks, whether they be phishing attacks or whatnot. But they were at the same time accelerating application development, right? Doing these various cloud migrations, however you want to define that, right? Whether it's a migration to a hybrid cloud, migration to leverage public cloud and get that public cloud agility. But they were all looking for also better customer experiences. And all of a sudden, in comes COVID-19, and those dynamics changed overnight, right? Now, all of a sudden, they had to implement VDI for everybody. We had customers that only had one laptop for every 10 employees. So they had to overnight try to fix that and try to allow for a BYOD or bring your own device in a home environment, quickly assessing their security capabilities at home, quickly recognizing whether or not somebody's connecting their device via a wireless network or a wired network and knowing whether that's a higher security or lower security risk, right? And then at the same time, implementing VDI by, unfortunately, many of them had to cannibalize app development environments or maybe even DR environments in order to stand up enough VDI to handle a remote workforce. And so now we're faced with how do we re-implement that DR and those app dev environments that were formerly there, while at the same time understanding that 35 to 40% of the workforce that is now working at home will never come back to the office. That's a radical issue that everybody's dealing with right now.
And one big upheaval is going to lead to another as we turn around and try to bring those people back to work, however many there are.
Well, and it's hard to find now the budget to re-implement and re-provision those app dev and DR environments that had been stood up and had to be cannibalized. So where's the money come from for that? How are you going to implement that? And the good news is that we have answers for that.
What do you think in terms of those types of shifts? VDI is a big deal, obviously, security being another one. But what are some of the other giant changes that people are being forced to make immediately?
Oh, well, let's face it. We have to protect our workers as they start looking to return to the office. And there's a couple different, I'm going to say radical technologies, new technologies for consumer and commercial, but technologies that the military and say TSA has been using for years. And that's forward-looking infrared radar technology, or FLIR, FLIR technology, to beef up your security acceptance or entryways to leverage the ability now to do facial recognition that at the same time can do temperature checking, spot temperature checking to see if anybody has a high temperature and is running a fever as they enter your building. You can also do social distance tracking, but more importantly, within that social distance tracking, we're able to actually track employees over time so that you're doing relationship tracking and being able to protect your employees and your customers as they come into your workplace, so that if someone is found to have, let's just say, COVID over a period of a week or two later, you can go back in time and see who they were close to during those pre-symptomatic timeframes where they're actually already able to spread that virus without knowing it, right? So we're able to implement solutions now that lay on top of your existing security, lay on top of your existing entryway applications, and they can be implemented at the edge, tied into the back-end systems within your own corporation. It's no longer enough to simply secure your data. We now have to secure our employees and secure our customers as well.
Right. And it's an interesting a value add to some systems that retailers are probably pretty familiar with, like beacon tracking in a store to see where people are hanging out, what are they looking at most. Now you can do it from a health perspective, keeping track of who people have interacted with.
Well, you're absolutely right. And truth be told, we've implemented these same technologies across many of the world's largest sports arenas like Mercedes-Benz Stadium, all the Home Depot stores across the world, all the McDonald's restaurants across the US. We use that same Bluetooth location enhancement or BLE technology encompassed on top of security systems with facial recognition to track the interests of consumers to see what it is that they're interested in buying, or maybe even to add to that experience within a stadium. So the stadium experience is now enhanced by these technologies to allow you to look and see what's available in those stadiums. Where are the restrooms? Walk me there. Well, we can do that same kind of technology now and layer it on top of your existing applications within your corporation to now protect your employees. And it's literally the same technology. The only thing we've added to it is the FLIR or the FLIR technology.
It's going to be an interesting value add there for protecting people because those first few days or weeks of an infection, you're not feeling sick. You might not even know you have a fever.
That's right. You have no idea that you are carrying a virus that can literally kill people. People are accidentally walking time bombs. They have no idea. And so you have to, we have the ability to protect them after the fact. And certainly it's not precog, right? We're not talking Minority Report here, although it's a great story. We're not doing anything like that. But the interesting thing is that the name of the software, that's the underlying technology behind this, is called Cognition with a K. So it is very similar to the precogs that we saw during the movie Minority Report.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting.
No, it is. And, that's figuring out if people walking in the front door have a fever is just a major first step that COVID forced upon us, but is a net benefit for an organization. Like you were saying, you have to protect your employees, you have to protect your customers, and it's not like this is just going to disappear at the end of the month.
No, it's absolutely not going to disappear at the end of the month. And so, it's really incumbent upon us to do spatial distancing tracking. You can measure these things. The systems automatically measure how far apart people are, typically in your foyers, in your congregation areas, in your water cooler areas, things like that. So this is technology that can help you across the board with social distancing adherence.
And as people are coming back to work, even let's assume the 35 to 40 don't come back, but people are still going to be in the office. It behooves every business to do something to protect them.
And actually, these technologies in your, I'm going to say government sector spaces, public sector spaces, these are technologies that are actively being deployed right now to protect all of those government workers and those official spaces where people have to meet, like your driver's licenses and bureaus and things like that.
Right, because generally speaking, people already have enough to worry about when they're headed to the DMV.
Well, the good news is you don't want to have to worry about your health when you're going in there to get your driver's license, right? And we certainly don't want to be giving people driver's licenses without the ability to test whether they can actually freaking drive. But that's neither here nor there.
This is kind of a new area of the industry, like actually taking these kinds of concerns and protecting people at a microbe level is not really something we've had in computers necessarily. Bugs meant something very different up until a few months ago. But in terms of certifications or in terms of tracks that people or organizations will have to take, what do you see as the future in that area?
Well, you know what? Great point. In fact, there are already standards, right? There's an FDA 510K clearance for this FLIR technology when it comes to tracking body temperatures and tracking people. So there are some actual government certifications already predefined in this particular space. So that helps. Some people were really concerned about the personal information or you're stepping over into somebody's personal space, right, when you're taking a picture of them. But the bottom line is that right now, and granted, there are going to be some issues with facial recognition if everybody has to wear a mask, and people should be wearing masks right now. We're not going to get into that. But as people get more and more open about traveling, walking, congregating, this is going to be a change that is now permanent, unfortunately, in our culture. And, they've already talked about the second wave that's going to be coming here in the fourth calendar quarter of this year. We know that the Asian community has been experiencing viruses like this now for several years. This is the third of its kind that's really hit Asia in a big way. It's the first real one that's come to our continent that's really affected our business, our economy, and our people, right, and our home lives.
Right.
So this is the first experience for us. But the bottom line is I think we're rolling with it. It is going to require new technology, but we absolutely have the technology to move forward, and we have the implementations. We have reference architectures to help implement these things and testing procedures. It's actually not all that hard to do, and it's really not all that expensive either.
Right. It's just a matter of being diligent, being careful, and again, maintaining those social distances that we need to have.
That's right. And this is going to be probably a permanent change to our culture, unfortunately.
Right.
And it's granted, it's not necessarily unfortunate, because as more things like this come around, we will be better prepared the next time.
Absolutely. But that does raise a great question. What we've been talking about is kind of protocols and social distance things. And as people slowly come back to the office is never going to be the same as it was before. What do you think about all of this in terms of other technologies?
Well, we're certainly seeing the usage. In fact, you and I are doing it today, right? More conference calls, more video calls. I'm going to say we're getting better at doing social distance learning or distance learning, distance communication, distance meetings. This is going to be good for being able to meet face to face without physically sitting face to face. It's really important to be able to look at your customer or your own people in the eye and just know whether they're paying attention or not, right? But more importantly, leveraging that technology that's now basically free for use, even like Zoom technology, free for use for up to 40 minutes, but the ability now to video those things at will. So people have to be more careful about what they're saying, because you never know. Like Georgia is a single party state. And what most people don't realize is what that means is I don't need your approval to record this conversation.
Right.
So, and if you've got somebody's face in the background, you have to always be at the ready to understand that somebody could be recording you right now. And you're going to have to watch what you're saying, watch what you're wearing, watch who's coming into and out of the frame at your home office. It's going to make people's home offices treated more like the actual office. And it's good and bad, right, Chris? Because we've already changed the way the American worker works and lives. Meaning, with the advent of the internet and the cell phone, we're expected when we get an email to respond to that email, certainly in less than 24 hours. Some people expect an answer within 2 hours.
Right.
Back in the days of memos that were distributed in manila envelopes with lines of names and lists of names, and you would check your name off the list and physically hand it to the person that's next on the list in your office, right? That's called an office memo distribution list. I'm not proud to say that I used to have to deal with those things early in my career, but now as we get information out, we're getting it to the people and to the individual. The actual work hours now extend well into the evening, but that also frees you up to do what you need to do in the middle of the day if you need to do something. So we're used to that. For all of us that have been working from home for years and years, this is no big deal. But for most of America, this is a very big deal. And so we're rolling with it. We've got great new technology, but more importantly, it's creating a whole lot more data. And then you have to be careful how long you're keeping that data. You have to be careful what's being recorded. And, I think it's just socially acceptable and responsible to ask the individual if it's okay to record the conversation, if it's okay to record the presentation, whatever it happens to be. But it is allowing us to now actually physically communicate without having to hop in an airplane and waste 4 hours to and fro, Birmingham, just to have a call for 45 minutes.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting too, because for a lot of places that are very standard and they're used to the in the office 9 to 5, these are completely revolutionary times. It opens up a lot of opportunity, like you're talking about, to save time, aggravation, obviously gas and money from not having to travel. But it seems to me that it also opens up some security risks that maybe we're not necessarily there, or at least as much, because of so much connectivity.
Well, let's see. This is where it really gets interesting. And we have been talking, I say we, Hewlett Packard Enterprise and the FBI have been doing a series of security summits around the U.S. starting about 2 years ago. We've been talking about the imminent dangers and threats specifically to our executives, because the executives are the ones that are targeted with spear phishing attacks. And a spear phishing attack is like a phishing attack, meaning that somebody sends you an email, it looks innocuous, it asks you to verify or validate your user ID or your password or something by clicking on the link that looks like, and by the way, you may recall that back around the end of December to early January timeframe, you might have seen the ADT phishing attack.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, ADT or someone, because obviously ADT didn't do this, but someone created a phishing attack that captured and basically usurped the ADT homepage, made it look exactly like the ADT homepage said. The good news is your electronic W-2 is available. Click on this link and you'll be provided with the ability to download your 2019 W-2. And if you click on that link, it then asks you to validate your employee ID and validate your birth date, validate your social security number. Before you realize it, you've given them all the information. What you didn't realize was you didn't click on adp.com. It clicked on adp.com.org.ru in Russia.
Very different website.
And the bottom line is a very different website, but it looked just like the authentic ADP website. That's a generic phishing attack. Now, what's happening right now with our executives is people take the time to find out something personal about you. So they send you something like, your son Johnny is whatever, who's away in college or was away in college, something's happened to them, or your daughter or your grandmother or your whatever. They give you some specific bit of information that is true for you. That's why we call it a spear phishing attack. They're specifically focused on a specific individual. And they go after executives because your executives are the one that have the most access to the most data back in the corporate data warehouse. It's big business for those bad actors overseas. And I mean big business in that they have thousands and thousands of cubicles filled with people that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're doing nothing but trying to get access to your data. And they're very successful. So we have to basically train, and train again on understanding the risks of phishing attacks and understanding how to recognize those things and protecting your employees, protecting your data, and protecting your customers as well.
Yeah, it's really kind of wild how some of these things have gotten, for lack of a better term, more professional. We have, what is it? R-Evil is a ransomware as a service that's running out there now.
That's right. It's scary how inexpensive it can be to hire some of these bad actors on your behalf to get information. And it's corporate espionage at its finest, right? I mean, corporate espionage has gone to the level that for basically $50, you can get somebody's password and user ID.
Jeez.
But let's face it, when Disney Plus went online, there were millions of Disney Plus users' credentials that were put out on the dark web for free just because they could. Right. And this is because they didn't have two-factor authentication when they first went live, and everybody jumped on that opportunity for the free first month. And then you cancel before day 31 so you don't get billed. And everybody wanted access to the latest and greatest Marvel movies and Star Wars and all that great stuff. Right. And it's free, or, so it should have been. So that's just one example, unfortunately. But the good and the bad in this is that there is technology to help protect you, so that even if they do get your user ID and password, we can protect the data on the back end with security check marks that are tracking usage heuristics and usage trends and using AI or artificial intelligence, such that if a user or device, such as what happened with Target back in the day, the Target breach was caused by someone that hacked the firmware of a managed thermostat.
Huh.
Right. So by replacing that firmware with fake firmware, they would then get access to the network, which then allowed them access to the devices, which then allowed them access to everything. So we, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, have actually taken great strides to guarantee that our server's firmware is unhackable. And even recently, it's been proved true. And of course, we have the cybersecurity certification that recognizes the fact that our servers are in fact unhackable. So it gives the users and our customers a lower insurance rate for that cybersecurity insurance. That's called Cyber Catalyst, by the way. Marsh is the underwriter that works with many different underwriters. They're the analyst firm that works with a group of 10 to 12 IT underwriters that write the insurance policies for data security, data privacy, and data insurance.
And by saying we're using Hewlett-Packard Enterprise hardware because of that unhackable firmware, they're getting a nice discount.
That's right. They are, in fact, getting a very nice discount. It can amount to 10% or better discount on your cybersecurity insurance, all because of that Cyber Catalyst certification. And by the way, the HP ProLiant servers, or Gen 10 of the ProLiant servers that feature that ILO 5, the integrated lights out management processor that features the silicon root of trust, is unhackable. And in fact, recently, one of our customers that had we'll just say a plethora of other manufacturers' servers, they were hacked. The bad actors were in there for some time, as you could hear from the customer. If you'd like, I can make the video available. It's out on YouTube, right? And you'd find out which healthcare provider or hospital provider it was that got hacked. And unfortunately, when a hospital's hacked, there are literally lives at risk when you cut off access to the data. If you can't find the patient records to understand whether somebody is allergic to a certain medication, then I can't go forward with that surgery. And they may already be prepped and ready to go. And all of a sudden, that information's gone. This is a real risk, and it really did happen less than 9 months ago. And unfortunately, the bad actors were in there long enough to copy all the data, but before they did the last step, which was encrypt the last amount of data and then send the ransomware email notice to the executives, they deleted all the data.
Ooh.
They deleted the backups. And then they attacked the servers themselves with fake firmware that bricked a lot of the systems. Now, as you'd hear from that customer, it bricked and took offline all the servers except for the Hewlett-Packard Enterprise ProLiant Gen 10 servers for whatever reason, as he says. He says, for whatever reason, the ProLiant Gen 10 servers weren't brought offline. Now, the nice thing is that they did have cybersecurity insurance, and the insurance provider did pay for the cost of recovering that data, paid for the ransom to get the data back, which they had to do for those servers other than the HPE servers. And then what happened at the end? The cybersecurity insurance paid to replace all those other servers with HPE ProLiant Gen 10 servers. So that wouldn't happen again. So it's a great story. It's not the kind of advertisement you can pay for. It's the kind you pray for. If you're HPE anyways.
So that covers a lot of the business personal safety questions. What are some of the new directions you think businesses will end up going in now that people are coming back as a result of COVID and the new reality that we're finding ourselves in?
Well, another great question, Chris. You're just full of great questions today. So you're doing your job well. No, the bottom line is that right now, in an effort to re-provision and stand back up those DR systems or those application development environments that had to be cannibalized in order to stand up the additional VDI or virtualization environments to send the workers home, one way to do that real quickly and easily is simply to extend out to the cloud, right? You could either go out to a public cloud service provider and do that and then be held hostage, right? If you ever have, data ingress is free. Data egress, not so free. It's like those first pieces of candy on the playground, right? The first ones are free and then they get you hooked. So taking your data into the cloud is always easy and it's always free. But getting it back out should a disaster occur, let's say somebody does a DR environment in the public cloud. All that data gets stored and it's a very cost-efficient environment. You've got great agility. You can stand up instances and VMs at will. But now once a DR occurs, now all of a sudden I have to stand up the compute for the disaster to recover the systems. The data is already there, but now I have to stand up the compute, point to those virtual LUNs, the data storage itself, and now serve it back up and send it back to the clients. That's called data egress, right? Or maybe you want to restore from the backed up information and data that was out in the cloud. Again, that would fall to the data egress fees, which are very steep. So one way to fix that is to implement a private cloud or maybe a private cloud in a colo service provider space so that it's not physically in the public cloud, but it's near public cloud, and your data now is not subsequent to or subject to those data egress fees. So HPE and Anexinet have the ability now to stand up something called GreenLake, which is the ability to stand up a private cloud within the four walls of a customer's facility. So they get all the same high level security that they've known and come to, expect, right? Plus they get control. So the customer gets to define what the infrastructure is, how it's implemented, and what level of security is, and who's accessing and everything else without the cha-ching factor of ratcheting up and changing that SLA or that service level agreement from the public cloud service provider. So you get the agility of public cloud, the economics of public cloud, but the controls and flexibility of private infrastructure via a private cloud. And that's how we're helping people stand up those DR systems, right? Doing DR as a service within a private cloud environment.
And it's also a certain amount of cost certainty when you go in that direction.
Not only cost certainty, but it can be fixed rate. And the only time that it changes is when the physical infrastructure itself needs to scale up or scale down, right? And the beauty of GreenLake is that the customer only pays for the infrastructure they're using when they use it. So as their business demands increase, that flexibility in the infrastructure increases, and we keep, Anexinet and HPE keeps an extra 10% buffer of both compute and storage on site at all times so that they can flex up and, more importantly, flex down. And when they flex down, most of your software licenses flex down as well, meaning that you no longer have to pay for those VMware licenses. You no longer pay for some of those key, very expensive software licenses once that server is turned off. And you only pay for the compute also, basically at the bare minimum commit level. We call that a bare level commit level, which is typically 10% below current usage, along with the extra buffer that's 10% above our current usage. So we're always able to play up 10 and down 10 at will. We're getting away from the huge stair-step purchasing methodologies that we've known for years, where people buy 3 to 5 years worth of infrastructure all in one large buy. Now, granted, as a hardware guy, I love customers like that, because what that means is they're buying 3 years of infrastructure and it may take them 2 years to grow into all of it. So they've got frozen assets or frozen capital that's sitting there doing nothing, and it's really hurting their balance sheet. So as far as cash flow goes, they've tied up a lot of cash in infrastructure that's doing nothing and may do nothing for 2 years' time. So the ability to flex up and flex down and scale as it grows, if you know you have a large application that's about to come online, you're about to need an additional 15%, we add that extra 5% automatically 2 weeks ahead of time. So it's there at the ready. And again, you don't pay for it until the day that it's physically, somebody presses the button, it goes into production. And that's all negotiated and planned for ahead of time.
I imagine there's also some AI that goes into keeping track of the usage so that people can see what their regular use patterns are.
Yes, indeed. The analytics engine does in fact use AI to leverage, you may have heard of InfoSight, right? So InfoSight is Hewlett-Packard Enterprise's artificial intelligence engine. It's an analytics and AI engine that uses machine learning to look to see how people are leveraging the infrastructure and using the infrastructure, tracks that usage, and gives them suggestions of how to optimize that infrastructure every day of the year, right? And if something's not tweaked or optimized, you'll get an alert that gives you a suggestion, and then you have the ability to press a button and say, okay, let's implement that change. If you're about to run out of storage, you can hit the button and say, yes, scale it. Now, you can make that fully automatic as well. Those are your options. But yes, absolutely, AI, machine learning, and analytics is a huge part of that facility.
And it's something that really has HPE GreenLake standing out from other private cloud options.
Well, in fact, you say that, interestingly enough. Flexera has done a couple studies, as well as IDC. The bottom line is that right now, 50% of public applications that were implemented in the public cloud from 2017 to 2018 were actually brought out of public cloud into a private cloud instance. They're going back on premise because of the privatization of the data or the scale of the SLA cost.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something you touched on a little bit earlier. There are use cases for cloud. It does make sense for businesses. It's a matter of doing it properly and making sure that people understand what they're signing up for, really.
That's absolutely right. And you know what? Uh, the use case for cloud is so strong that it's really easy to swipe a credit card, especially if you've got an app dev environment. You don't have the same security required for production data for application development, or maybe it's DR as a service, whatever it might be. What we find is a lot of people do app dev in the cloud. Or maybe they do their front end servers in the cloud and all the back end databases are tied back in a private cloud environment, right? So we call that a multi-cloud environment. And you want the ability then to have a dashboard that's going to give you visibility to all of those multiple cloud instantiations or instances, whether they be public, private, or hybrid.
And I think we might have just made some people a little bit dizzy.
Yeah, the bottom line is that we've been talking about hybrid cloud for many years, and hybrid cloud is nothing more than mixing traditional IT with public cloud capabilities or public cloud technology, and that creates a hybrid cloud, right? Now, when you take multiple cloud instances, maybe you've implemented a VMware Cloud Federation cloud instance, or maybe you've implemented a private cloud of your own using OpenStack, right? There's so many different ways you can implement a cloud. Maybe you've done a private cloud within a colo service provider, right? That would be a private cloud versus a public cloud. Or maybe you've extended Azure Stack to Azure Cloud Services, creating a hybrid cloud within a single multi-cloud instance, right? You've got Azure Stack can be implemented privately within your own four walls, making its own private cloud. But then if you connect it to the Azure Cloud Services from Microsoft in a public cloud instance, now I've connected that private cloud to a public cloud, creating a multi-cloud or hybrid cloud instance there. It becomes truly multi-cloud when you then also extend that to giving yourself visibility to Google Cloud Services or AWS Cloud Services or other private cloud instances that you might have in your environment. Now you have a multi-cloud environment that needs to be managed, hopefully, within a central dashboard that allows you the visibility to look at the cost of each of those resources, and it should give you suggestions as to where you should land that next application based on the available resources and the cost for that available resource. We have those tools. We can help them make better decisions. And really, that's why HP and Anexinet are partnered to do these kinds of things for our customers with cloud assessments and whatnot.
Right, because it's really about first of all, finding what the application needs, and then finding the right tool for the job.
That's right. And we call that the right mix of hybrid cloud, right? Getting cloud right, addressing the people problem, and then overcoming the economics.
Yeah, and when you talk about the people problem, can you expand on that?
A lot of times people don't realize, or customers don't realize, that 70 to 80% of all folders are physically visible to everybody in an organization. Now, it's one thing to have them available to everybody in a physical team like Microsoft Teams can allow for and manage. But if you haven't implemented something like Microsoft Teams, they just implemented file shares, they typically don't take the time to ensure that they're locked down and only visible to the people and accessible to the people that need to have access to them.
Right.
And that can be very, very dangerous. So you're looking at a digital transformation need or a project that needs to be put in place to assess the security of that data and the accessibility from multiple people. And unfortunately, you have to create a zero tolerance or a zero security, zero trust ethic and zero trust policies, because what we're finding is that over 50% of all bad actors aren't actually outside of your organization. They're inside your organization, like what happened with Capital One and their move to AWS. Right? This is a very public known incident that just happened last year. It happened in the second half of last year. The Capital One IT organization was told ahead of time that the company was moving to the cloud. They were going to be moving to AWS. Well, one of the application developers or database developers was getting outsourced. And so she gave herself a backdoor access into one of the applications and then went to work for AWS. Once they were at AWS and Capital One had moved to AWS, they then got access to that application and access to that data, and they were in the systems long enough to copy 3 entire hard drives worth of data and made some of that information available. to the dark web. So, I'm not making up these stories. Unfortunately, these stories are all too real. And I only mention the name of the company because it's well known in the internet. It was well covered by the news outlets just this past year. It's very unfortunate, and it should not have happened. And we absolutely have tools and processes in place to check utilization. Like I was talking about in the Target instance, we have usage-based analytics engine that tracks the usage and access of devices like a thermostat or users. And based on their average user access, we know what applications they're accessing on a daily basis. And when suddenly they access a new database or a new data source and they access it heavily, they can automatically get cut off by the system's AI analytics engine. And they should get cut off automatically. And then it then creates a request or an SNMP alert with an email request to security saying, should this person have access? Say yes, and it'll unlock it and give them open access once again. But if not, now they're alerted that there was a bad actor in there getting access to data. And it happens now within seconds instead of hours, days, or months. And on average, it takes 146 days for an IT admin to recognize that a bad actor is in your data.
Which by that time is way, way too long.
It's way beyond way too long. Yeah.
In those type of circumstances, automation is kind of a necessity.
It is.
It's too much for an individual or even a group of individuals to keep track of and to watch network packets, for example. Like, how would the average system administrator really want or even be able to take a look and make sure that their thermostat is not accessing SharePoint, for example?
No, you're right. Usage-based analytics is not new. Unfortunately, it's not used as pervasively as it should be. And even the FBI last year, as I said, we were doing a security roadshow across the country last year with the FBI cybersecurity data architects. And we now have one of those individuals working with us and for us. And he's a great resource. But the bottom line is the head of FBI cybersecurity has recognized that this is not a job that can be done manually by humans. You have to leverage AI because of the sheer rate and the size of the threat and the number of bad actors there are out there trying to hit and access our data.
What do you think in terms of various different types of businesses? How do these solutions scale for, say, I don't know, a Fortune 500 company versus a small bank down the street?
Well, great question. So when you're looking at a small banks down the street or and whether it's a financial firm or just a typical SMB, small to medium business with 200 seats or less, those are the kinds of folks that are looking to go to the cloud 100%, right? So they're looking to go to the cloud. They're looking for better security. They're looking for security assessment services and cloud assessment services, both of which, of course, Anexinet and HPE can help them with. But more importantly, they might have a 100% cloud strategy, right? A lot of people have a cloud first strategy, and nearly 95% of all enterprise customers, in fact, right now, have a cloud first strategy for all new applications. And they should, right? Because it makes good business sense. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be a public cloud, right? Or a private cloud or hybrid cloud. We recognize that cloud is not a destination. Cloud is an experience. Most people should be looking to deliver IT as a cloud service or IT as a service, right? And when you do that, you're leveraging automation, you're leveraging scale dynamics and metrics that are going to automatically scale up and scale down with your demand of your business, so that as your business grows, your IT scales automatically. As your business shrinks, your IT should also shrink. But unfortunately, for most customers today, once they buy that infrastructure, they're stuck with that infrastructure for 3 to 5 years. And now they have to write down that infrastructure. So we need to help those small, medium business all the way up to the enterprises get out of the business of managing, writing down assets that are depreciating over time, and help in their cash flow and help them manage their business instead of manage IT. So yes, small to medium business and the small banks, absolutely, they should be looking at either private cloud, or if they want to get out of the business of data centers entirely, they can do private cloud in a colo, so they get all of the economics of cloud, but they get the flexibility and controls of private IT.
Right. And I think for a lot of those types of customers, it might even be better because they might not have the understanding of what kind of data they're using, and they might accidentally overbuy
Well, and actually, Chris, in reality, the bottom line is that we would always do a cloud assessment first. So we'd look to see how much data they actually have. We'd look to see if this data is compressible, how much data can be deduped, right? In deduplicating data, you're getting rid of 40 to 80% of the total data. And then by compressing it, you're saving another 40%. With technologies like SimpliVity from HPE, for instance, we guarantee that customers are saving 90% of their data, or that they could typically buy 10% of the data they think they need, the data storage, that is, that they think they need. And we put that in writing because we know that our dedupe and compression and optimization technology works that well, right? And we do dedupe, compression, and optimization online, inline, real time, all the time, meaning that we're deduping and compressing that data before the first block of data is ever written or committed to disk or SSD. Most other solutions out there are going to force you to write that data, and then after the fact, they're going to try to compress it or dedupe it, but you've already used the data storage and you've expanded that footprint. Now later on, I'm going to get some of that footprint back. But you've already had to hydrate. You've had the full data hydrated before dehydrating it, compressing, and deduping it. And I know there's a lot of terms that I just flew right through there, but data hydration is data in its native form without compression or deduplication. And when you dehydrate it, you're squeezing it down, you're compressing it into its smallest form with getting rid of all the duplication you can while still allowing for redundancy and resiliency within your data platform. We call that an intelligent data platform.
And it's just, I mean, it's a fancy way of saying we're being as efficient as possible with the data that you are asking the storage system to maintain.
That's right. And by doing that, it saves the customers a ton of money. You need to put that money in security platforms, in automation, in the consulting on the front end to make sure on the back end to make sure that it's implemented correctly. And then we spend the money on the infrastructure only that needs to be spent when it needs to be spent.
What are some of the things that HPE is doing to respond to the COVID-19 crisis?
Well, I tell you what, we are doing some really neat things. First and foremost, we've created the HPE Foundation has provided funding to our partner NetHope that supports development of databases that are member organizations that include some of the largest humanitarian organizations in the world collecting COVID-19 related needs across the entire membership database. But we're also working with the COVID-19 Task Force and the CDC, leveraging some of our high performance computing capabilities in the COVID-19 High Performance Computing Consortium. You might have heard the president mention that a few weeks ago at the beginning of this COVID-19 pandemic, but we've taken 5 of the world's largest supercomputers and added them and re-provisioned them out there to help map the 44 enzymes that define the COVID-19 virus itself, or the coronavirus. One of those supercomputers is actually called Cori, and it's a Cray supercomputer. Of course, now Hewlett-Packard Enterprise has Cray within our portfolio, and we're hoping to ultimately bring an end to that to the pandemic. But the Cori is actually one of the smaller ones. It's only a 30 petaflop supercomputer. We've added 2 100 petaflop supercomputers, a 150 petaflop supercomputer, and 2 1 exaflop supercomputers into that mix to help map the solutions and help create, hopefully, what's going to be the solution to basically curing us of this disease and of this virus once and for all. At the same time, we're doing distance learning solutions through the YWCA. We've got curated pathways to innovation to help people with distance learning capabilities from home. We've got a career village. It's an online crowdsourced career advice platform for folks in this time where so many people are out of work and needing opportunities for income. We've got so many things that HPE is doing, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to promote that. We're really proud of what we're doing internally, but more importantly, all that work with those supercomputers is done on our dime. We've not only re-provisioned all those supercomputers to help map the enzyme and find a solution with the CDC and the COVID-19 task force, but we're also paying for all the engineering resources and all the software licenses to do so. All of that is being paid for by Antonio Neri and the HP Executive Council and us as HP employees to help make that happen. We're all working together to help make the world safer and healthier. You know, I'd love to think that we could use these supercomputers to help solve world peace and world hunger. But if we can at least create world health, that's a great step forward.
I guess I will give it to you, the opportunity, if you have anything else, final thoughts.
Well, I tell you what, I thank you so much for the time today, and I love the partnership with Anexinet. I've done so many things with you folks over the years. Love your ability to go out there and work with us and wrap your own Anexinet services around our Green Lake private services. We're all focused about being the world's edge to cloud leading everything as a service provider. For everything as a service when it comes to IT. And you and Anexinet are helping us get there. You wrap our services around with your own services and bring it to your customers as a single cohesive solution. Thank you for that. Thanks for the time today.
All right. Joe Vidal, Chief Technologist for the channel for Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.